Have you ever noticed that the loudest voice in your life isn't outside of you, it's inside your head? And the question is, when you're thinking, are you really talking or are you actually listening to something deeper? I remember a moment that changed how I saw my own mind. I was sitting in complete silence one night, wrestling with a decision that could change the course of my life. My mind was racing, so many what-ifs, so many fears. But in the middle of all that noise, I caught something unusual. It wasn't me speaking. It felt like I was listening to a voice beyond my fears, beyond my ego, beyond my surface self. That night I realized when I'm thinking, I'm not just creating thoughts, I'm listening. I'm listening to the conditioning I grew up with, to the beliefs I inherited, to the doubts that don't belong to me, and sometimes to the whisper of wisdom that does. The realization shifted everything. Number one, thoughts are echoes, not origins. When you pause long enough to watch your own mind, you'll discover something most people never notice. The majority of the thoughts that rise inside you are not fresh creations. They are echoes. They are repetitions of conversations you've had, judgments you've heard, warnings you've been told, and fears you've carried for years. Thinking feels like an original act, but most of the time it is simply replaying a recording. I learned this in one of the hardest seasons of my life. I was about to walk. Personal story, the voices in your head, away from a career I had invested years into, and my head was filled with voices. What will people say? What if you fail? You'll regret it forever. At first, I believed these words were my own truth, my own rational reasoning. But then, in one quiet moment, I realized something stunning. Those voices weren't really mine. They were echoes. Echoes of a teacher who once told me I wake and cut out for risk. Echoes of a parent who carried their own fears of financial instability. Echoes of friends who had settled for comfort and projected their doubt onto me. None of those voices were born in that present moment. They were remnants, recycled memories, dressed up as thoughts, bouncing around inside me. And I began to understand that when we are thinking, we are often listening to the ghosts of the past. You've probably experienced this too. Standing at the edge of a decision, wanting to step forward, but paralyzed by a voice that whispers, don't. It's too risky. You'll embarrass yourself. And when you trace it back, you realize it sounds eerily similar to something someone once said to you years ago. That's the trap. We mistake echoes for our own truth, but the moment you see them for what they are, you are free. Free to separate what is an echo from what is an authentic insight. Free to choose whether to keep listening or to change the channel. This is why many people live the same year on repeat, mistaking yesterday's echoes for today's reality. But when you become aware, you realize that you don't have to live as a prisoner of those echoes. You can rise above them. You can ask, is this thought really mine? Does it serve me? Or is it just an old echo that no longer belongs in my life? The courage to question your thoughts, to challenge the echo, is the beginning of transformation. Because the truth is, the deepest wisdom does not echo, it creates. It doesn't repeat what you've heard before. It speaks from a higher place, one that calls you into growth, into risk, into the unknown, where your true life begins. Once you see this, you'll never mistake the chatter of echoes for the voice of your soul again. Number 2, your mind is a radio, not just a speaker. What if I told you that your mind is less like a creator of thoughts and more like a receiver, like a radio? Constantly tuning into signals, picking up frequencies you may not even know are there. This idea struck me during a long restless night when I couldn't stop replaying all the what-ifs about a relationship I had just walked away from. My thoughts were loud, chaotic, relentless, like static on an untuned station. But then I remembered keynote 1. Thoughts are echoes, not origins. Something a mentor once told me. Your mind doesn't always originate the sound. It often just picks it up. That hit me. I began to ask myself, whose station am I tuned into right now? I realized that half of the noise in my head wasn't mine at all. It was my ex's voice telling me I'd regret leaving. It was the societal broadcast that said, you're only complete if you're with someone. It was the frequency of fear, the background hum of doubt, the channel of insecurity that had been playing in me for years. And just like with a radio, the more I focused on that station, the louder it became. But here's the truth. The mind has more than one frequency available. When I got quiet, when I started to breathe, to listen differently, I realized I could tune away from the static. I could tune into another station, one that spoke in a calmer, softer tone. The station of truth, the voice that said, this decision is hard, but it's right. You are not breaking, you are becoming. That's when it hit me. Thinking is listening, and what you hear depends on which frequency you're tuned to. If you've ever wondered why, some days your thoughts drag you into darkness, while other days you feel guided and lifted, it's because you're tuned into a different station. Some of those stations were programmed into you by your parents, your culture, your past failures, your fears. But there's also a higher frequency available, the frequency of wisdom, clarity, and courage. The problem is most people don't realize they have the power to change the station. They think whatever comes into their head is their truth. But no, your mind is just the radio, and you are the listener. The key is learning to recognize the static, to notice when you're tuned into fear or negativity, and then to consciously switch the dial. For me, that shift changed everything. I began to listen less to the old broadcast of fear and more to the quieter, wiser signal within. And here's the secret. That frequency is always there waiting for you, but you won't hear it until you stop clinging to the noise and dare to tune into something higher. Once you understand this, you'll stop believing every thought you think. You'll realize you have the choice to change the channel, and that realization alone can alter the course of your entire life. Number 3, the power of observation over identification. The most liberating moment in a person's life is when they stop identifying with every thought that passes through their mind and instead learn to observe it. Keynote 2. Your mind is a radio, not just a speaker, like watching clouds drift across the sky. For years, I made the mistake of believing that every thought I had was who I was. If the thought said, "You're not good enough," I wore it like a label. If the thought said, "You'll never make it," I carried it like a prophecy. But then something happened that forced me to see the difference between identifying with a thought and observing it. I was preparing to give a talk in front of hundreds of people, and my mind went wild the night before. You're going to forget your words. They'll laugh at you. You'll embarrass yourself. The fear was so loud that I felt paralyzed. But then in the middle of that storm, a strange question arose in me. If I can hear these thoughts, then who is the one listening? That realization broke something open. I saw for the first time that I wasn't the voice in my head. I was the observer of that voice. In that moment, the fear lost its grip because I understood that the thought wasn't truth. It was just noise passing through. And sure enough, the next day when I stood on that stage, the fear had quieted and a deeper calm had taken its place. This is the hidden power of observation. When you step back and simply notice your thoughts without clinging to them, they lose their control over you. It's like standing on the riverbank watching the water flow by instead of being swept away by the current. Most people suffer not because of their thoughts, but because they identify so deeply with them that they think, "This is me, this is who I am." But the truth is, you are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them, hears them, and has the power to let them pass. Think of the times you've been caught in self-doubt or anger, saying to yourself, "I am angry, I am afraid, I am worthless." In those moments, you fuse your identity with the thought and it consumes you. But the moment you shift and say, "I notice that anger is here. I notice that fear is present. I notice that doubt is speaking," everything changes. You've taken back your power because now you are the watcher, not the prisoner. This practice of observation is not easy, but it is the doorway to freedom. The greatest sages, leaders, and visionaries all share this ability. They don't mistake every thought for truth. They choose which ones deserve their attention and which ones can simply pass like clouds. The day you stop identifying with your thoughts and start observing them is the day you realize that you are more than your mind. You are the awareness behind it. That's when life stops controlling you and you begin to control how you live it. Number 4. Silence sharpens the signal. There is a reason why the most powerful breakthroughs in human history often come in moments of silence, not noise. Silence has a way of stripping away the keynote 3. Observation over identification, clutter, sharpening the signal, and revealing the truth that endless thinking can never reach. I learned this the hard way during a season when my life felt like it was spiraling out of control. I had just faced a string of disappointments, dreams that didn't work out, relationships that ended, opportunities that slipped through my fingers, and my head was filled with an endless storm of questions. Why did this happen? What's wrong with me? What should I do next? The more I thought, the more confused I became, as if the noise inside me was only amplifying the chaos. One evening, exhausted and desperate for clarity, I went for a long walk by myself. I left my phone at home, turned off the music, and just walked in. Silence. At first, the noise in my head screamed louder, my mind replaying old conversations, regrets, and anxieties. But as the minutes passed and the silence of the night settled into me, something shifted. The noise began to quiet, and in that quiet, I heard a different kind of voice, not a shout, not a frantic replay, but a whisper that said, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of something new. Let go of what's gone and make room for what's coming." That whisper didn't come from panic. It came from silence. And it was in that moment I realized that silence isn't empty. It's full of answers, full of wisdom, full of guidance that you can't hear when you're drowning in noise. Most of us live our lives constantly surrounded by distractions, phones buzzing, TV playing, conversations swirling, thoughts racing, and we wonder why we can't find clarity. But clarity doesn't come from adding more. It comes from subtracting. It comes from quieting the external and internal noise until you can finally hear the signal beneath it all. Silence is the tuning fork of the soul. It helps you separate what is yours from what is just static. And the truth is, silence terrifies many people because in silence you're forced to face yourself, your fears, your emptiness, your truths. But it is in that confrontation a transformation begins. Some of the greatest leaders, thinkers, and visionaries practice silence not as an escape but as a discipline. Jesus, retreating to the mountains. Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. Writers and inventors disappearing into solitude before birthing their greatest works. Silence is not weakness, it is strength. It sharpens the signal so you can finally hear the wisdom that has been waiting for you all along. And the day you choose to create silence in your life, whether for a few minutes or a few hours, you'll discover that the answers you've been chasing in the noise were always inside you, waiting for you to listen. Number 5, you don't control first thoughts, but you do control second listening. One of the most liberating lessons you can ever learn is that you don't control the first thought that enters your mind, but you absolutely control what you do with it afterward. The first thought is automatic. It can be triggered by fear, past trauma, habit, or conditioning. But, keynote 4, silence sharpens the signal, the second listening, the choice to engage, feed, or reject that thought is where your power lies. I discovered this during one of the most painful experiences of my life. I had just failed at a project I poured my heart into. And the moment the failure became clear, the first thought slammed into me like a punch. You're worthless. You're not good enough. It was so quick, so sharp that it almost felt like it belonged to me. My chest tightened, my mind raced, and I felt myself spiraling. But then, in the middle of the storm, I remembered something I had once read. You can't stop the first arrow, but you don't have to shoot yourself with the second. That sentence echoed in me. I realized that my first thought wasn't something I chose. It was the conditioned voice of past failures and old wounds. But the second listening, the decision to either dwell on that thought or to question it, that was mine. And in that moment, I made a different choice. Instead of saying, yes, I am worth less, I said, no, that's just an old tape playing. This failure doesn't define me, it refines me. That shift in listening pulled me back from despair and gave me the strength to stand up again. And I began to notice this pattern everywhere. The first thought often shows up as doubt, fear, or negativity. You see someone succeeding and the first thought whispers jealousy. You face a challenge and the first thought screams you can't. You step into uncertainty and the first thought tells you to run. But none of these thoughts are the problem. The problem begins when you keep listening to them, when you feed them, when you let them take root. That's where people get trapped, mistaking their first thought for final truth. But freedom begins the moment you recognize the gap. You may not control what arrives, but you control what stays. You control whether to keep listening to fear or to change the channel to courage. You control whether to repeat the voice of doubt or to choose the voice of faith. That's the difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise. It's not that the successful never have negative first thoughts. They do, but they've mastered the art of second listening. They know when to discard the poison and when to amplify the wisdom. And so, the real question is not what was my first thought, but what am I choosing to listen to next? Because your future will not be built on the first thought that appears. It will be built on the second, listening you choose. Number 6. Wisdom is hidden in the whisper, not the shout. The greatest truths in life rarely come crashing in like thunder. They arrive softly, like a whisper so quiet you, Keynote 5. First thought versus second listening could easily miss them if you're too distracted by the noise. Ego shouts. Fear repeats itself loudly and endlessly. Insecurity screams to be heard, but wisdom almost always see. Omis gently, patiently, like a friend who doesn't force their way into the room, but waits for you to notice their presence. I learned this lesson during a turning point in my life when I was on the verge of making a big decision, whether to accept a job offer that promised financial security but felt completely out of alignment with my purpose. Everyone around me had an opinion, and they made their voices loud. You'd be crazy to say no. Think of the stability. This is your chance. Don't waste it. Their words turned into echoes in my mind, growing louder every day until I couldn't hear anything else. My fear joined in, screaming, "If you don't take this, you'll regret it forever." And in the middle of all that noise, I almost convinced myself to follow the safe path. But then one night, while lying awake in bed, exhausted from the constant tug-of-war in my mind, something different happened. Beneath all the shouting voices, I heard something softer, something quieter. It didn't come with panic. It didn't come with pressure. It was a gentle whisper that simply said, "This is not your path." For a moment, I doubted it, thinking maybe it was just fear disguised as wisdom. But the more I listened, the more I felt peace in that whisper. It didn't demand, it didn't scare me, it didn't force my hand. It simply guided me, and deep down I knew it was the truth. That night I made the decision to decline the offer, and though it was terrifying, it turned out to be the most pivotal choice of my life. The very next year I found myself walking a road that felt alive with purpose, something that job could never have given me. That's when I realized something profound. Wisdom doesn't compete with the noise. It waits for you to quiet down enough to hear it. Most people miss wisdom not because it isn't speaking, but because they're tuned only to the loudest voice, the shout of ego, the cry of fear, the demands of others. But wisdom doesn't shout because it doesn't need to. It knows its power. It knows that when you're ready, when you finally silence the noise, you will hear it. And once you hear it, you'll never forget it. This is why creating silence in your life isn't optional. It's essential, because when you learn to listen to the whisper, you discover that the most life-changing truths were never. Keynote 6. Wisdom is hidden in the whisper, hiding from you. They were waiting for you to listen differently, and that whisper once heard will guide you more faithfully than the loudest shout ever could. Number 7. Reframing life through conscious listening. The moment you realize that every thought is not a command but a message, your entire life begins to reframe itself, because now you stop reacting blindly and start listening consciously. This shift transforms how you see challenges, setbacks, even your own doubts, because instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" I experienced this shift during one of the darkest chapters of my journey. After a painful betrayal by someone I trusted deeply, my mind filled with thoughts of anger, shame, and bitterness. The first wave of thinking screamed, "You're broken. You'll never trust again. People will always hurt you." For weeks, I kept listening to that voice, and the more I did, the heavier the weight of resentment became. But one morning, as I sat in silence reflecting on the chaos in my mind, I suddenly asked myself, what if these thoughts are not the end of my story, but a message pointing me to something deeper? That single question changed everything. I began to listen differently. Instead of identifying with the thought, "I'll never trust again," I reframed it. This pain is showing me the value of discernment, the importance of choosing people wisely. Instead of listening to the voice that said, "You are broken," I reframed it into, "This wound is an invitation to heal and grow stronger than before." In that reframing, I found freedom. Because when you consciously listen, you don't just hear the negativity, you extract the hidden lesson behind it. And that is where growth is born. Life will never stop sending you thoughts, many of them painful, discouraging, or fearful. But conscious listening gives you the ability to sift through them, to separate the noise from the wisdom, the poison from the medicine. It teaches you to ask, is this thought trying to chain me, or is it trying to change me? That question alone can reframe your entire perspective. Imagine how differently you would live if every setback became not a confirmation of your weakness, but a keynote 7, reframing life through conscious listening, message urging you to discover your strength. Imagine if every failure wasn't a declaration of your inadequacy, but a signal redirecting you toward your true path. This is the power of conscious listening. It turns pain into teachers, fear into fuel, and doubt into direction. The people who rise above life's storms are not those who never have negative thoughts, but those who learn to listen to them consciously, to reframe them into wisdom, and to act from that wisdom instead of reacting from fear. Once you master this, you no longer see your mind as an enemy, but as a messenger. Every thought becomes an opportunity to reject. That doesn't serve you, to embrace what guides you, and to reframe your entire life through the lens of growth. And when you live this way, life stops being something that happens to you. It becomes something that unfolds for you. So the next time your mind begins to race, pause and remember. Thinking is not just talking to yourself, it is listening. The question is, what are you listening to? Are you replaying echoes of the past? Are you tuned into the static of fear? Or are you quiet enough to hear the whisper of wisdom? Your thoughts are not chains unless you decide to wear them. They are not commands unless you obey them. They are signals, messages, invitations, and you hold the power to choose which ones to honor and which ones to release. Life is not transformed by silencing the mind. It is transformed by learning to listen differently. Because when you finally listen with awareness, you discover that the voice you've been waiting for, the closing words, listen differently, live powerfully, guidance you've been chasing, the truth you've been searching for, it was never outside of you. It was always here, within you, waiting for you to